Hey, it's Sunday again, and time for us now to start thinking of next week's tournament, which will be steel, because we just had marble. Then I'm going to show you something else. A question that's often asked is why in one of my cities do I come up against really massive numbers of enemy, and in other cities the enemy squad size is not so high. How is it worked out? How does Timon and his team determine, what formula do they use to decide how many enemy they're going to send my way? So we'll look at the fight first, and then we'll look at that. Right, you're getting used to this, I'm sure. This is our weekly quick pick for the steel tournament. The shady characters this week. It's not an ideal auto-fight province by any means, because you're going to come up against some light melee, the thief. You're coming up against a mage unit who can put spells on your men and make them less effective. The spell will decrease their attack and their defense. And then there are some really nasty things that look like armored vehicles or Sherman tanks. The heavy melee, which you can hit and hit and hit and hit them, and they just sort of laugh it off. You've got to chisel away at them slowly. So it's not really a very easy tournament province to get a one-size-fits-all. Now, the green arrows here are the theoretical combinations where things work well. So against the mage, for example, when you want to take her out, you would tend to use one of your light ranged or one of your light melee. That's what the book says. Now you can see here we have the thief, and she's a difficult one. She requires one of these two, and this one requires one of those two. This one comes at you, and she paralyzes your men. So you want to take, she's called the Thorn Rose Mage. You want to get rid of her as soon as you can. What will you be able to do her with? Effectively, really only archers. There are other things, there are dogs, for example, but the archers are also effective against this mob, you see. So ideally you would want to use archers against the mages and the heavy melee. But archers are very vulnerable. You've got to keep them behind protection. These chappies will take them out bing bang bong, and this one over here will eat them. Munch! So if you're going to use archers, you've got to use them from a distance. What do you do about her? Because she's your number 2 priority. You want to get rid of her as soon as you've got rid of the Thorn Rose. You want to go for the thief. Well, the book says treants. Very effective. The problem, though, is that auto-fight will always charge into the attack. So auto-fight is going to charge in with your thief in front, and she's going to get slaughtered. And the treants are very slow moving, so they're going to come trudgy up. By the time they get to the fight, all of your archers will be dead. So if you're going to manually fight, your best combination for an elf is a treant and an archer. And you would mix and match your numbers, as I've showed over here, you see. You will choose your numbers for the fight. For a human, you're going to use paladins, and you're going to also use archers. Now, the difference, though, you see, is that the ideal animal for the heavy melee is one of your mages. Now, sadly, this is the sorceress. It's an elf unit. You can't use her. She's useless. They've completely, totally taken her to pieces. You could, in fact, consider using the Blossom Mage. It's a lower level animal, but it's still quite effective because it's got a long range. So she would be able to take these out from a long way away. If you're a human, you don't have that problem. When you are fighting lots of these, then you would just use a priest, because the priests are much, much more effective fighting weapon than what the sorceress is. So there you are. That's more or less it. Now here's something I wanted to show you that I've just spliced into the video. We have our guide to the seasonal event, which is the March of the Herds. And I do every day take a screenshot of the exclusive building. Yesterday's exclusive building, Timon promised us, was going to do something different. It wasn't just going to give population and culture, it would have special abilities. But he said that the buildings only worked for a limited time. This is the one that popped up yesterday. It gives you 10% more attack value on your mage units. So, we would be wanting to use mages here. If we had one of these buildings, you can stack them. So you could add 10 and 10, another 10, another 10, depending how many you had. So this would be ideal, but the catch is it expires after a certain time. And it's 5 days. So I really don't think I'm going to be rushing out and getting myself buildings like that. Now let's have a look at the other stuff, the goods to prepare and so on and so forth. Now of course I've done everything sort of back to front because I've started as usual talking about the shady characters first. Pre-build, this is what I should have said to start with. If you look at the goodies in that drop screen that falls down from the top of your city, it's always the same position in the tier. That's basic goods, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. It's steel, scrolls, number 2, scrolls, number 2, magic dust. Righty, well I haven't done any exploration at all. And I am reminding you, as I always do, this is Sunday, the tournament hasn't started yet, you see, tournament hasn't started down there. So let's go and see. Okay, so we've hit lucky, the first one I click on because it's going to show a thief, it's going to show a knight, thornrose mage and a swamp monster. So let's go in. I'm going to just quickly send in an archer, alright? Just so we can have a look at the terrain and decide how we're going to fight it. Alright. Now remember, you can surrender when you've had a look, you see. So we're not going to lose any troops. Now, here's your problem, you see. You're not going to get to this lady over here. So putting your archer in the middle is a waste of time. I think what we're going to do is we're going to use 3 golems over there, and we're going to use 2 archers here, and let's see how that works for us. So let's surrender it. Okay, so we want the golems at the top and we want the archers at the bottom. The first one we choose is a golem, the second one we choose is a golem, the third one we choose is an archer, fourth one we choose is a golem, and the fifth one is an archer. There we go, let's go look. Okay, we don't want to get too close to this thief here, you see. We also cannot hit the blossom mage, so just let's move forward so we'll get the shot next time. We're going to lose 1 or 2 here. Again, you see, we can't get in there. So again, let's just move up a little bit. So she comes at us and she has a smack, and now the thief comes in. Well, we have no way around this, you see, because of that head, so we're going to have to play it this way. I think I'm just going to leave him there. Okay, now we want to get this one here immobilized, and I think the only way to do it is that way. Okay, so we've drawn her teeth significantly. In fact, so significantly that she is dead. Right, now we just need to take this one here out. Okay, and we may as well complete the job. Okay, I'm going to just do a tactical retreat at this moment, I think. The important thing is to have a go at the enemy one at a time, you see. Okay, so we want to stay out of his range. I might have made an error there, but it doesn't matter. The only way we can stay away from the green chappie is to go over here, and again to go over there. Now, of course, the problem is that golems aren't very effective against him, so I'm afraid we're going to take some losses here, because I haven't planned this very well, and the terrain is also a bit of a bugger. But anyway, you will get the point. this wasn't really meant to be an illustration of clever gameplay. It was merely meant to be an illustration of the kind of things you're going to be up against. If we had have had better terrain, we would have had much lower losses. Okay, now how are we going to get away from that one? The answer is we aren't. I think we just have to bludgeon him to death. So this has not been a pretty fight, and please, if there was an Elvenar competition for Fighter of the Week, which I do not pretend to be, I've had some quite large losses here, but at least I've given you a look at the enemy squads and at the kind of things that you could be doing against them. Now, let's go and have a look at the issue of squad size. First of all, the size of enemy that you come up against will depend on the number of the province. The higher you go, the more the enemy gets, and on the number of stars. That day 1 is 1 star, day 2 is 2 stars. The day 2 fights are more difficult than the day 1. I've taken 4 different cities, you see, in the last marble tournament. This one was the same fight as that one. They were identical, because you may not know this, but on province number 1, fight number 1 over here, you'll have 1 fight, 2 fight, 3 fight, 4 fight. If you go to province number 1, day 1, then this fight will be the same as in your other city, that fight. And this fight here, number 2 in that province, same level, will be the same enemy, you see. So these two were identical. This, of course, is my best city, and look at that. The enemy you're up against, there are 900. In my second biggest city, the enemy is, it looks like 600 to me. I haven't got my glasses on. And then in my very smallest city that I fight regularly, the enemy is much smaller than that. And this is another city that I never fight in there, and you can see it's tiny. These are all on level 1 fights, you see. So the question now is, how do inner games work out how many enemy to send after you? Inner games decided with the old tournament system, which they replaced several months ago. The tournaments were not fair on beginners. People with small cities just weren't featuring. So they decided that the most logical thing to do would be to tailor the amount of enemy that you come up against your own level in the game. And what they did is they went to squad size. Here's the tech tree from a beginner city. There, squad size, you see. 3 or 4 times in a chapter you'll get a chance to increase your squad size. Every time that your squad size goes up, you will have bigger armies. So what they've done is they've taken the enemy squad size and they have coupled it to your own squad size. It's as simple as that. As you go deeper and deeper into the tournament, you'll get more enemy, but the basic, the root of the equation is your squad size. Here we go. From the beginning of the game, you get squad size increase number 1, 2, 3, 4. You get several squad size every chapter that you do. This is not complete. I think there's another 2 or 3 chapters that come at the bottom of this diagram that I haven't added yet. Okay, how does it work? Well, basically, you get 3 times the size of the number of the squad size increase. So if you have 24 in your squads, and you do number 4 squad size increase, you add 3 times 4, 12, then you will have 36. And when you do the next squad size increase, then you will go to, what is that there, 51, I think it is, yes, 51. I want to tell you now, it's very clever, because they run simulations on typical cities, and they say, if you're in chapter 3, then you should have a squad size of such and such, and you should also, because they simulate it, you should have so many factories, and you should have this, and you should have the other thing. So they have a way of working out what a typical player has, and then they throw at you in the tournaments what you are ready to handle. So your newbie, your newcomer player, has exactly the same chances of winning a fight, statistically, as somebody who's been around for months. There are a couple of differences, though. when it comes to number of provinces, for example, because your experienced player will have explored 20 provinces of that type, and he gets 20 shots at the tournament. The newbie may only get 2, 3, or 4. But province for province, you'll find that your beginner player does just as well as your experienced player, and that is actually very fair. I'm going to show you an alternative strategy. I want to warn you, though, alternative strategies, the developers set up the game the way I explained to you, with simulations of cities. The more alternative you get, the more you stray from their typical pattern, the more likely you are going to get yourself into trouble. It happens many times, like over-exploring too many provinces in the map. Suddenly you discover that you need orcs to negotiate provinces. I don't recommend, unless you are a very experienced player, don't do the unorthodox. But if you want to do the unorthodox, here's just a little peep at something for you. On the tech tree, you can't go to here until you've done that, and you can't go to there till you've done that. But there are squad size upgrades that are sort of out on a limb. They're not part of the main flow of the tech tree, so you can leave them, you can abandon them. Throughout the whole tech tree, every chapter, there are some of these that you don't do unless you want to do them. Now, the alternative strategy is don't do them, because every time you do a squad size upgrade, the enemy size goes up, and so that doesn't really matter, because your chances of winning are no greater because your increase is proportional to theirs. But you see, if you want to win in tournaments, I have a city that I only fight in tournaments. My city building I do in my main city. My number 2 city I really only go for the fun of the tournaments, and I want to do well in tournaments. So I've built lots of factories so that I've got enough goods to cater with, and I have built lots of armories so that I've got enough troops to fight with. Every time my squad size goes up, I will need to build more armories to make more troops, and I will also find that my catering costs will go up in that province, because as you squad size up, the province's complexity increases, not just the fighting, but also the amount of goods that you need to buy or to cater. So some players have said, well, don't do the squad size upgrades. And if you're only going to fight, yeah, that's fine. But otherwise, your city is going to get terribly unsymmetrical, and when you get to chapter 11, you won't be able to win any fights in the provinces if you do that way. So I don't really recommend it, but I'm just mentioning it to you. If you are a beginner player, you will find that if you keep your squad sizes lower, you will win more fights with the same number of factories and the same number of armories. So, if that's the case, the question is, how do you improve your chances of winning at tournaments? Because increasing your squad size is not going to help, and the answer is ancient wonders. There are ancient wonders that increase your goods production, and there are ancient wonders that improve your attack and your defense, and if you take those to a very high level, then you will be a better fighter, and you're going to start winning over the enemy, because he hasn't got ancient wonders to support him, so you will have an advantage over him. Well, there you go. That's what I promised I would show you, and I hope it helped. If you want to see more of these videos, then as usual, just subscribe down below, and come and join us on Facebook. See you then. Bye.